9 million people shop at Sainsbury's every week. A business with a turnover of 15 billion a year.
So do you want to go on a till now?
Now, Sainsbury's chief executive is going back to basics. Back down to earth.
I think these sticky labels are a nightmare.
And reality bites.
This is HP sauce.
Disaster, really.
Back to the floor, Thursday at 9 on BBC2.
A mid-afternoon news summary now on BBC2 with Fiona Bruce.
Good afternoon. The government is facing increasing pressure to ban the sale of French beef. Last week, an EU report revealed that sewage had been used in French animal feed. A leading scientist who advises the government on BSE says he believes French meat should be withdrawn from sale until it's known to be safe.
French farmers are allowed to feed pigs and poultry with material recycled from other animals. But as in Britain, it's illegal to feed cattle with offal from other cattle because of the risk of spreading BSE. The European Commission found that French livestock feed contained animal and even human waste, and that wastewater from plants recycling cattle carcasses had also been allowed into feed. Scientists say sewage, once heat-treated and made into pellets, is most unlikely to carry disease, but they're worried that the French feed industry may have broken other food safety laws as well. British supermarkets are hoping to strike a chord with consumers worried about French food safety. Sainsbury's is giving shoppers a firm push in the direction of alternatives to French meat, cutting the price of British beef by a fifth. Other supermarkets also seem to think consumers are ready to shun French food.
I don't buy French produce at all, but that's not on health or hygiene grounds. That's because I'm very angry about what they've done over the date-based export scheme, and a lot of other people in this country feel the same way.
The government says it's satisfied that food from France is safe. However, ministers have promised to improve labelling so consumers can tell more easily where the food they buy was produced.
Rail industry leaders are meeting the Deputy Prime Minister, John Prescott, this afternoon to discuss new safety measures following the Paddington rail crash. Mr Prescott wants the operating companies to set up a confidential telephone line so members of staff can report their concerns about safety and changes in driver training.
The drive for safety is now the #1 priority for the railways. A driver's mistake was the immediate cause of the crash near Paddington, and this afternoon Britain's train operators will back proposals for an independent review of the training methods used across the industry. The government wants a confidential whistleblowing system so that rail staff can report safety concerns without feeling their jobs are threatened. A former rail track manager believes the industry has become slack about safety.
It's very frustrating as a fire safety manager to try and ensure that the works are carried out and what needs to be done is actually completed.
Meanwhile, one train company has dismissed a leaked internal document claiming that a time bomb is ready to go off because of cuts in driver training. Connex South Eastern insisted all training procedures were fully safety validated.
Environmental protesters have climbed to the top of the Millennium Wheel on the south bank of the Thames in London to demonstrate against dam building in Spain and India. A group of 8 people took part in the protest. 3 of them later came down voluntarily from the wheel and were arrested for suspected criminal damage. It's thought 2 protesters still at the top of the wheel and at least 3 more are perched partway up. 1 man has been killed and 4 other people injured after a chemical leak at the Western General Hospital in Edinburgh. 40 people had to be evacuated from the research block where it happened, but no patients were put at risk.
The emergency services were called in to contain the spill at the Medical Research Council facility in the grounds of the Western General Hospital. A laboratory worker had got into difficulties while handling liquid nitrogen, used to preserve medical samples. The effect of coming into contact with the chemical would produce severe burns. He died at the scene. 4 of his colleagues suffered minor injuries as they went to help him.
They just tried to take him out of the area, which is obviously a very dangerous area. That was their main aim. They would know themselves that it was a dangerous area, and that's what they tried to do.
The facility, which investigates the genetic basis of serious diseases like cancer, had to be evacuated. The main hospital building was not at risk. The Health and Safety Executive has launched an inquiry.
A giant iceberg, 50 miles long and 25 miles wide, is heading for the Falkland Islands. The iceberg, called B10A, broke away from Antarctica 7 years ago and has been drifting south in the Atlantic ever since. Scientists warn it could reach the Falklands within a week, but that it'll probably break up into smaller pieces by the time it gets there. That's it. I'll be back with the next news over on BBC One at 6 o'clock.
Good afternoon, now the Midlands News with Sally Nicholson and me, Bernadette Kearney. The police and social workers in Stafford have begun an investigation into the death of a man in his 80s. It's thought the body of William Dugmore may have lain undiscovered for as long as 2 months. A post-mortem is to be carried out to establish how he died. Neighbours in the area say they're shocked that he wasn't missed for such a long time. A West Midlands man who spent almost 20 years protesting his innocence took his case to the Court of Appeal in London today. Keith Twitchell claims that detectives from the West Midlands Serious Crime Squad tortured him into making a confession.
Keith Twitchell from Birmingham arrived at the Court of Appeal with his barrister, alleging that he'd been tortured into confessing to a crime he didn't commit. The court heard that a security guard had been shot dead at a factory in Willenhall in November 1980. Keith Twitchell was arrested within hours and was later sentenced to 20 years in jail for manslaughter. Speaking after his release in 1993, he described the way that detectives had allegedly interrogated him.
They handcuffed me to a chair, stuck a plastic bag over my head until I came unconscious. And, well, then they asked me to sign a confession, which I had no idea what the contents of the confession were anyway. I still refused. I put the plastic bag over my head again, and then I gave it and signed.
Stephen Solly QC told the court that the scenario of torture involving a plastic bag being placed over Mr. Twitchell's head was so far beyond the legitimacy of the law that it beggared belief. He also claimed that Mr. Twitchell had been beaten up and that evidence had been fabricated against him. But Lord Justice Rose warned that he was not here to conduct a trial of the Serious Crime Squad officers. Peter Wilson for BBC Midlands Today at the Court of Appeal in London.
A West Midlands MEP has arrived in France carrying a joint of British beef in defiance of the French government ban. Liberal Democrat Liz Lynn was allowed through customs at Strasbourg Airport with the joint of meat, which she plans to serve up for colleagues in the European Parliament. Wolverhampton and Dudley breweries, the makers of Banks's beer, are taking over the Mansfield brewery in a £250 million deal. Banks's say the Nottinghamshire brewery will continue to operate for at least 2 years, but 250 jobs will be lost as a result of the takeover. That's our news for now. Join us again on BBC One at 6:30 for all the Midlands news, sport and weather with subtitles. From all of us for now, bye-bye.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, thankfully today the weather is a good deal quieter than it was over the weekend.